Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Hot Yoga, Cool Clothes, and Better Shared Service Processes, brought to you by IOFM and sponsored by apexanalytix. We have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. If you have any technical questions or issues using the WebEx platform, please use the chat box and I will respond right away. If you have any issues with audio, please click on the phone icon above the chat window to receive the teleconference info. For those that do call in, to ensure call quality, everyone's lines have been muted. If you happen to get disconnected, you can log on again using the instructions provided in your webinar confirmation email. If you continue to experience difficulty, please email webinars@iofm.com and we will respond as soon as we can. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please type your questions into the chat box and hit send to submit them. At the end of the presentation, we will have our presenters answer these questions. We will also have one polling question during the webinar. A pop-up box will appear when we run each poll. Please choose from the multiple choice answers and hit submit. We'd love to have your participation and insight. This webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a thank you email with the on-demand materials within 2 business days. And with that out of the way, I would like to briefly introduce our speakers for today. We will hear from Mark Brousseau, President of Brousseau and Associates. We will also hear from Jose Sorondo, Director of Global Finance Shared Services at Lululemon. And finally, we will also hear from Phil Beane, Senior Vice President of Global Field Operations at apexanalytix. And with that out of the way, I would like to welcome our speakers and hand the webinar off to Phil.
Thank you for that, Jove. Next slide. So I'll just take a second to introduce myself and for those not familiar, apexanalytix. As Jove said, my name is Phil Beane. I am responsible for global operations at Apex. I've been with Apex just over 17 years, and during that time have been responsible for our global recovery audit services and our first strike technology. So a little bit about me, now a little bit about apexanalytix for those that aren't familiar. We are an innovator. We're an innovator of software, audit, consulting solutions. Our number one goal is to drive measurable value for our clients. We've been in business for over 30 years, and we go to market with 4 solutions. So just a quick introduction to the 4 solutions. Starting from left to right, our first is our global Apex recovery audit services. The next is our first strike prevention technology. The third is our Apex portal, and the last is our smart VM database. So a little bit about me and Apex, and with that, I will turn it over to Jose.
Thank you so much. So Jose Sorondo, been with Lululemon since 2018, and I lead for Lululemon the finance side of the shared services. And yeah, for folks that don't know, Lululemon, it's an apparel athleisure brand. Yeah, and we've been growing substantially for the last 4 or 5 years. We continue to have a big spike, and with that big spike, we have a lot more vendors and transactions. Back to you, Phil. Oh, this one is mine too. All right, so yeah, so basically, as I was sharing, since I joined in 2018, we've been seeing a spike in growth in revenue. And reference there, we went from $2 billion to $6 billion roughly for 2021, and we now have probably about triple the invoices that we used to have back then. And back then, all the transaction processing was happening manually. We have adopted technology and processes that has enabled us to not be touching all those transactions, and we now touch only a small percentage of those transactions. However, while we've been growing through all this growth, we have had, even before the growth, instances where we might make a duplicate payment or a payment to the wrong vendor, and this obviously causes some reprocessing of the transaction and recovering the money and everything. So we had signs that we had some opportunity in that space, and and that's pretty much when we started looking around and landed with apexanalytix. So this one, this particular slide about, choosing that right partner, as I was saying in the previous slide, we actually went to different conferences where you can have the opportunity to meet the different options outside there in the market. And the reason that we landed with apexanalytix basically was because, they offer the offers that Phil was presenting in the first slide, the different options, the different products presented there. So we see this like a long-term partnership where we started the partnership by doing the AP recovery. So basically looking for all those duplicate payments or erroneous payments. But then also, that kind of makes the business case to potentially leverage the other different products that Apex offers. Two things that work really well for us at the beginning of the partnership. So one is that typically, and this could be similar in your organization, two typical challenges that we will face when looking to onboard new vendors on the shared services organization. One is budget, if we are able to secure that budget. But the other one, the second one, will be having availability from the IT team in the organization to help us, to extract data or to integrate data or to make systems integrations. So those are typically two obstacles that we have to overcome when we're looking to work with new vendors. And it was super convenient to do this with Apex. One, because there was no need for integration. It's basically a request in a very specific format that the IT team can understand pretty well, and what the ask is on how to provide the information, how to provide the data, and that happens seamlessly, within hours. I can say that it requires some validation, of course, but very easy to get the data in the format required. Apex has been doing this for such a long time that they have, if you're Oracle or if you're SAP or if depending on which is your ERP, there are templates already that tell you exactly what is the need for data. So it was really easy to navigate that initial phase, and that's for them to kickstart the project. And then the other one is that we're basically paying upon money is actually recovered, so it's kind of self-funded, so the budget constraint it's not a constraint. And the other one, and it's not even mentioned here, but it's that when we were doing the request for a proposal and looking at the different options and pricing and everything, it just felt right from the get-go that it was going to be easy to work with apexanalytix. While we know the second runner there that didn't make it in this particular process, and it was a little bit more like putting pressure, on, oh, you need to do this and you need to sign here and you need to do that and we need to start right away. And, there was like a lot of pressure from the second runner, while with the Apex team felt from the get-go there was going to be a partnership and easier way to work. That's it for this slide. All right. So then, we've been now running with Apex for almost 3 years. So what are the findings that we have seen during the years? So definitely, we have duplicate payments, and that ties into some system limitations that we have to control that. And we're definitely, have that identified as an area of opportunity. Invoice coding training. So, if everything's coded properly, then that mitigates a little bit the issue with duplicate payments. And we also have an opportunity to do a master data cleanup of all our vendors. We've been enrolling vendors for a long time now. We have thousands of them. So we've been, establishing routines. For example, we deactivate things that probably your organization already does, or if you don't have a master data management department yet, but basically we deactivate vendors that have not been used in the last 13 months. We do that on purposely in case you have a vendor that we pay once a year. Yeah, and then we see some themes, right? So there are like certain vendors that has been identified that are vendors that we have issues, recurrent issues. So those have been flagged too, and then those are monitored closer. And then also, the opportunity to identify cancel vendors, vendors that will no longer use, that which I mentioned also that we start working on. So, it's just and this is, specific to our case, but your organization might be different findings, but definitely, one of the positive sides, one of the outcomes of engaging in a recovery is that you get pretty much for free, like what might cost a lot if you're bringing consultants to do the work. Pretty much you're getting for free different opportunities, different areas where your organization can improve. So it's a bonus from the engagement.
Yeah, and Jose, just one point, actually maybe 2 points. The first is we've had a partnership with Lululemon for quite some time, and so we've got multiple cycles that we can analyze. But the types of things, the types of recoveries that we've identified and ultimately brought back to Lululemon are aligned with what we see with other customers. So you all are not an anomaly. We didn't find any sort of systemic issues. It was just the basics. But I want to talk, the second point I want to talk about is the last point, which is that canceled contract services. I mean, we all know we're still dealing with COVID, and I think it's fair to say that COVID has had an impact to accounts payable. And although this, to me, is not an accounts payable issue, I think it's very pertinent to talk about as it pertains to COVID. We saw, I guess it was probably the latter part of 2020, maybe late Q3, we started seeing a spike in statement recoveries related to canceled services, canceled contracts, canceled services. And actually, it continues to be one of the top root causes of recoveries that we're finding. And there's lots of reasons for that, lots of examples. One that kind of sticks out in my head is one of our clients had a janitorial service for a building that was occupied. COVID hit, everyone's working from home, that janitorial service is no longer needed, invoices are still coming in, and they're still being paid. And so over the last year or so, as I've had conversations with clients about, hey, we're seeing spikes in these more canceled services, like there's multiple reasons of why it's happening. There are some instances where, well, this service was prepaid, this wasn't prepaid, this is on a PO, this isn't on a PO. And so it's really difficult to eliminate it 100%. I understand that. But one of the things I've heard over and over is really to try to eliminate this. I don't think it's possible to totally, but to try to minimize the impact. It's really a training issue. It's an education issue. It's making sure that those folks that are responsible for canceling these service, maybe the same people that are responsible for procuring the service, that they're communicating internally within the organization. So if I cancel this janitorial service, was it on a PO? Was there a prepayment for that? If so, do I need to get with AP so we can do a reconciliation? Do I need to notify AP? Do I need to put a block on the PO? So anyway, I just those 2 points. One, Jose, you all are aligned with what we find with other customers. And then I thought it was worth calling out that this canceled service contract, we're seeing an increase across all of our clients, started in the latter part of 2020, and we're actually still seeing it today. So I'm gonna, I want to take just a minute and talk about this benchmarking report that we've been working on. It's exciting stuff. It's something that we've often talked about. We've speculated for years, but it's a benchmarking report within the procure-to-pay space. We're fortunate we get to work with the largest organizations in the world. This report specifically, we analyzed 6 trillion, that's trillion with a T, $6 trillion in spend over multiple years, really to pull out one specific data point, which is like the impact of postponing a recovery audit to an organization. And so as we're analyzing multiple years of recovery audit data, looking at trillions of spend. Again, we've speculated that when companies decide to take a gap year, or let's just say they take a break. So most of our clients will be on some sort of continuous audit, and they decide for one reason or the other to take a break. Is there an erosion on the recoveries? And again, we've speculated, yes, it is, but now we're on the cusp of wrapping up this benchmarking report that's actually going to prove to us that, yes, the data says that for a customer, a client who takes a gap year or takes a break, that roughly 23% of the potential recoveries, these are dollars that will be delivered back to your organizations, will disappear. And that's on an annual basis. And so, in simple terms, if you're, you do an audit on an annual basis, and on an annual basis, we recover $1 million and return back to you. Again, this is an average. If you take a gap or you take a break in your audit for 1 year, roughly 23% of the potential recoveries will erode. And so I'm sure you're wondering, like, okay, Phil, where are these recoveries going? And they fall into generally 2, 3, maybe 4 buckets. From the most obvious, that the supplier goes out of business. And, I'm sure you all see it in the press. There has been a huge spike in companies going out of business due to COVID. And so you did business with a supplier, maybe you made a duplicate, maybe there was an outstanding credit, you took a break, you weren't actively pursuing that audit, a supplier goes out of business, that's non-recoverable. That's part of the erosion. You stop doing business with the supplier. Like maybe the example of the janitorial service, you're no longer doing business with that supplier. Again, that's piece of the erosion. Another category not as prominent is the supplier actually writes it off, or they move it to cash, move it to a different cost center, maybe move it to profit. Arguably, that's not the right thing to do. And then some recoveries, depending on the timing, are escheated to states based on escheat laws within a given state. So, big picture, we at Apex have thought this and have spoke about it really without any hard data, that there is elevated risk when there is a gap in between recovery audit years. And now this benchmarking report's allowing us to actually say, not only do we think it, but we actually have the data behind it and the percentage, which is roughly 23%. So Jose, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Phil. So I briefly touched base on this one on the previous slides, but yeah, so basically when we were going through that exercise of looking at the different options in the market for doing an AP recovery, so basically looking for all those duplicates, erroneous payments, and so on, accounts reconciliation, statements reconciliations, we saw the potential of the long-term partnership with apexanalytix. Just because there are products there that exist, it's first strike, being the one that we have right now our eyes on, that basically we prove already the solution offered by engaging on the AP recovery. So it makes it an easier business case to do the investment on the first strike solution. That we know, that we need, just because the growth we're experiencing, and the more transactions that we have, and the more countries that we operate, and the more, let's call them, buyers that we have in the organization, and so on. So for multiple reasons, it only makes sense that we need, some defense there to improve our processes, and not, instead of doing the recovery, we're just basically looking to cut some of the errors, catch some of the errors ourselves. And then, there are other products as the portal and the smart VM. So there are different solutions there that, we continue to explore. But we see, we see it as a long-term partnership where we can be leveraging in this case Apex for the different solutions, and at the end it's kind of a win-win relationship, because we are improving our processes, or saving the money for the organization. Yeah, so that's that.
So I'll wrap up my slides with a question, actually two questions that I get asked all the time. And the first is, hey, Phil, what drives recovery audits? And then the second is, and how much are you going to find? So I'll start with the second one. I've yet to be able to nail that one. We do have some data that helps us, but it's really difficult to know exactly what you're going to find. But the first question I think is easy to answer, which is what drives recovery audits? And I answer that typically with the same response. It might seem generic, but it's very powerful, and it's change. And so, Jose earlier talked about the change at Lululemon. It's a positive change, the growth that they've had over the last 4 or 5 years. And so I've got a slide here that really emphasizes this point of change and the potential impact. I want to make sure everyone is clear. This slide is not Lululemon. This is another client of ours. It is not Lululemon, but it actually tells the story of the impact of change. And although this is a positive change, it created a potential negative change. So the client that I'm showing you this slide on, they actually have our first strike duplicate payment for prevention technology. And it's a good thing because they recently, last year, migrated from an on-prem ERP solution. It's one of the 2 biggest in the world. So you got a 50-50 chance. They migrated from an on-prem solution to the ERP's cloud solution. And although this project was quite a long project, the actual migration piece was roughly 6 months. But I'm going to talk about kind of a 4-month period. And you can see that from July to October. And during this 4 months, this was right in the kind of the heat of migrating off-prem to the cloud solution. They had a spike of 1,600% of prevented duplicates. So these were duplicates that were entered into the system. Fortunately for this client, they had a solution in place to stop these. And so the point of the slide is less about this specific client. It's really more about change and the impact of change, whether it be a positive change like the change that Lululemon has gone through over a year, which is a growth change, or this client, which is migrating to the latest and greatest ERP, which I think we would all agree is positive. I mean, there's some negative change. Maybe there was a downturn in your business and that there was some layoffs or something. But it's just so important that if your organization is going through change, that you plan for that change. And there's a couple ways you can do it. One, have some sort of prevention solution in place, and that should eliminate the potential of duplicates going out the door. If you don't have technology in place, you should consider a partner with a firm to do a recovery audit, so that during this transition, this change period, you're minimizing the risk of funds actually leaving your organization. Okay, next slide, Jose. I'll turn it over to you to conclude.
Thank you so much, Phil. Yeah, so in conclusion here, change, can be growth, which is the example that we just shared for Lululemon at the beginning, or new tech, which kind of what Phil was mentioning in the previous slide for this other organization, and and obviously growth and upgraded tech, all this is positive, right? It's definitely all great stuff. However, with that growth or new tech or any major change that happens through the organization, it also opens the opportunity for an increase, in processing error, or if you launch, I don't know, a new system, or you launch new policies, as PO to pay, you may have invoices flowing without a PO and with a PO. So it just opens the opportunity for the error. So it's great to have in mind that there are solutions out there that can help us to navigate through those challenges of positive change, but still challenges from the transaction process inside. Yeah. And we started this journey a few years ago, and we just keep going on it. And we measure ourselves and we see, hey, how are we doing comparing 2019 to 2020 to 2021? So it's also use leverage as how are we improving our processes year to year based on the recoveries that we get. So it can be used in many shapes or forms. Just you get the benefit of getting someone else to look at your processes and data and give you some suggestions. You get the actual recoveries, of course, and then you get the opportunity to work with the team on performance, on see which areas you want to focus for in this case we're in January, so perfect timing to consider to add in performance settings for the team. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Just keep that 23% erosion in mind also as you're prioritizing initiatives.
Absolutely.
So just quickly, there's going to be a poll question for those that would like follow-up information on the topics that you have on your screen. You'll have the chance to choose items on the right side of your screen that you're interested in, and certainly we will be following up on more information with that. And with that, Mark, I will turn it over to you for Q&A.
That sounds awesome. We're going to enter the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you haven't already submitted your question for Phil and Jose, go ahead. Use the chat tool on your screen to submit them now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Our first question from an attendee, Jose, is for you. They want to know, how do you process your invoices?
No problem. Yeah, so I will say the bulk of the invoices, a very high percentage of the invoices are now processed PO back. So we implemented that a year ago or so, over a year ago. And yeah, so that we implemented PO to pay policy, and basically we ask that and it has two sides, I will say. One is that we ask that the invoice come directly from the vendor, and then two, that the invoice is referencing PO, and there's different ways that we can receive that invoice and match to the PO. But yeah, that's one big change that we did that enabled us to keep up with the growth and have more control and increases in on-time payments and a lot of different benefits. But yeah, I will say in short summary, the majority of our invoices today are PO back.
Are you using automated technology to process those invoices, Jose?
Yeah, so we partnered with software that is broadly used here in Canada, I think more than in the US. It's called Koopa. So Koopa, I would say it's our PO machine. And then we, for a big percentage of the vendors actually go into Koopa as a portal, and they can flip POs there into invoices. They can invoice against POs. So there's a component there that is touch-free for the shared services team.
Another attendee writes, who is responsible for adding suppliers to your vendor master database, and what is that process?
Yeah, so as we continue to mature, and that's an area that we launched also in the last few years. Now we have an area called Master Data Management, MDM, and it's part of my organization. So we are responsible for onboarding the vendors into the ERP, and we have some controls there that to make sure that we have the right information on the tax ID, that we have the right banking information. That would be more going on a fraud type talk, but we have a lot of controls around banking changes since that is a topic that is very relevant these days. So we do that part as part of my organization.
Another attendee writes, have you seen any growth in the number of duplicate invoices that your organization receives over the past 2 years? And I reckon, if I had to guess, that this is probably related to the increased number of emailed invoices that many AP departments are receiving. Have you seen anything like that, Jose?
We actually were looking, since we are starting a new year and reviewing performance from previous year. We actually, and that's something that we got support from Apex to have a third-party view on it. We were just reviewing the numbers of recoveries of 2021 compared to 2020, including duplicates, and we actually see a decrease. So it's a good sign, that we implemented some internal controls to improve the process. So it's great, when you look at comparison year to year, or if you want to do it, quarter to quarter. So we actually, in our specific case, we see a drop, and yeah, and it's as I mentioned in the beginning, because of the partnership, right? So we have Apex helping us along the way, and we implement some of the suggestions presented there, and then we measure against that and see the results.
How about it, Phil? Are organizations experiencing more duplicate invoices, and is that another reason to use technology like yours?
It depends, Mark. I mean, we've seen pockets where there's been material increases. So I would say there's been some impact by COVID for duplicates, probably more right when it occurred, because companies were trying to get folks set up at home. Access, security was a big concern with organizations, with people working from home and getting on VPN, having the right access. In the event that companies were still receiving, check in or paper invoices, they're going to an office where no one's there, and they're delayed. So there was some, but what I would say is that when folks went out for COVID, organizations realized that there was change needed. So we've got to change our systems and our processes. And that was probably the bigger driver versus just COVID in a silo. It was kind of COVID and the disruption there, but organizations realizing, like, we've got to be able to accommodate this remote world. And so we're going to have to change the way our folks interact with our systems and suppliers.
Jose, a question from an attendee. They write, what strategies worked well when vendors refused to engage with Apex as part of the audit process?
Yes, that actually does happen, and I repeat it a few times, but it comes back to the partnership. So in that instance, for example, we try to leverage the business to help us collaborate and getting the information that we need to, and then we also escalate within my org. So the supervisor will try to contact the vendor, our manager will try to contact the vendor, and we also pick and choose, right? Like if we're talking about what we'll consider a small recovery, and a small can vary depending on the organization, and then maybe we just move on. But if it's something that where we see that there's opportunity, then we will be all hands on it. And yeah, we have a specific case that we were completely all hands, because there was a potential to uncover a lot of things for a specific vendor. So yeah, so it will depend on the case, but definitely it's to answer will be around the partnership with the business and Apex and the finance organization to go after the vendor if needed to be.
So what is best practice here, Phil? What is it organizations should be doing in the lead up to an audit recovery process to let their vendors know what's going on and to get them engaged in the process?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, I mean, it's probably fair to say that most suppliers, the contract that our clients have with their suppliers, there's a right to audit clause in there. But just because there's a right to audit clause doesn't mean that the supplier is going to cooperate. So a lot of our clients will ask us, hey, can you provide us with just some generic verbiage about what you're going to be doing? Sometimes they will have internal teams draft up communication, and they'll either send it out to their suppliers if they have enough email addresses. A lot of our clients have portals. A lot have our Apex portal. Other clients have other portals. And so they'll put communication out on these portals that, we were engaging with, ABC and in our situation, apexanalytix, to partner for a recovery audit. We would ask that you cooperate. And so those are a couple things that our clients do. Some clients just, they've been doing continuous audits for so many years, they don't need to do that anymore. But there's always going to be a supplier or two that just will not cooperate. They will not respond. What we like to do is we like to empower our clients with, and Jose touched on this a little bit, which is We score everything at Apex. We love to analyze data. And so because we get to work with these suppliers across a lot of our clients, the same supplier, we get to score the suppliers. And so if we've got 2 or 3 suppliers that maybe for Lululemon are not responding or they're not cooperating, we will look at the score on that supplier that says, hey, what's the likelihood that there would be a recovery here? And Jose said, if it's a supplier where it's just a low likelihood. We've never found any systemic issues with this supplier. We do business with them with 12 other clients. We never find anything. Then it may not be worth pushing the envelope versus actually this supplier, perpetually has recoveries. They've had some systemic issues in the past. They went through this, that, and the other. It's a high scoring supplier. Jose, we would love your help, maybe getting a buyer or someone that owns that relationship to help us engage the supplier and professionally ask them to cooperate with us.
Yeah.
So in other words, you pick your battles.
Yes. And Phil, just to add to that, because it just came to me, I think and maybe because this was a couple of years ago, but it's important, like internal change management, internal communication within the organization. So kind of, broadly advertise, broadcast, that this recovery is going on. Because, in our case, I think we didn't do enough internally on this. So the result on that, it was a lot of internal emails asking, like, hey, we see your name on signing on this letter, and they're going after our vendors, is this legit? So we did have a lot of internal questions, that if this audit was legit. So yeah. So if you're going for it as an organization, definitely worthwhile doing some internal communications, a lot of internal communications, so people know that this is going on. And then when they get the question from the vendor to the buyer in the organization, if this is a legit, in these days of spam and all that stuff, then that they already know that this is the case. So you just avoid a little bit of rework there.
Another attendee writes, Jose, can you go into further detail on how your recovery audit helped provide you with insights into process and training gaps?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the outcomes that I highlighted there is that we get detailed reports on what are the recoveries that were achieved during the last year. There's also including like a benchmark exercise to see how you compare to similar companies or within your industry. So there's a lot of information that we get out of those reports provided by Apex. And then, then that becomes a actionable information. Okay, what's the main root cause here? And then we can definitely start improving our processes. So to give you an example of, something that we did after reviewing the report, someone in my team will now be looking more at Invoices process because we don't have first strike yet. And then, we'll be trying to see if we could identify any errors there in advance, so we can tackle that internally. So that will be an example of something that we did out of the report.
Phil, give us some other examples of how Apex clients are using your audit recovery results to help improve their processes and training.
Yeah, so just from the most simple is clients that have a duplicate payment problem. And so is the root cause of the duplicate payment that it's just a human error? There's a keying. Historically, that was the case. That's not so much the case anymore. Maybe you have an OCR technology, and that is creating issues with the character recognition. Maybe it's that you have merged multiple entities together, and there's still invoices going to various places creating the dupe. So the duplicate is really generally straightforward, and a recommendation on how to fix that. It's really actionable. When it gets to the statement recoveries, it is a little bit more challenging because a lot of what we identify and recover through our supplier statement audit, it's not necessarily an AP root cause. So AP didn't necessarily, if it's a return, well, that's not, AP doesn't control returns. I talked about canceled invoice and canceled contracts. And so there are some systemic things like returns. returns a few years back it seemed to be a hot topic, and we did a lot of collaboration with clients on deep diving and creating swim lanes on, okay, where exactly is the breakdown with returns? Is it requesting the RMA and getting that information, sending it from the doc, getting that information back to AP, posting and credit? So we've done some deep dive into that. Other things are just training. And so there's been, when there's turnover within an organization, making sure everyone understands that, hey, when I do something, when I cancel this contract or cancel this service or purchase something without a PO, just ensuring that folks are following standard processes and procedures. And it's not that it's malicious, it's just maybe someone doesn't know.
Jose, an attendee, writes, where is your staff working? And how does that impact the recovery process and the remediation?
Yeah, so right. Well, I would say before COVID, we were already split in terms of location. We added business process outsourcing partner in 2019, and we've been with them since. So now we have a good portion of the team outsourced. And then for the rest of the team that's supposed to be all based in the same office in Vancouver, we've been working remote since COVID, and will likely be working that way for a longer time now. And how does that impact the recoveries? So yeah, like you can make the case, right, that because we are all in different locations, might be harder to be synchronized, but to be honest and to be fair, I think because we outsourced before COVID, and I've been working in that space for a long period of time now. We already I think like we were already ready to work from home or to work remote or not to be necessarily in the office environment. So honestly, I don't think that we've been negatively impacted because of the location. If any, no, it continues to be business as usual on that side.
So Phil, we don't know when or if AP teams are going to be returning to the office full time. Let's give some advice to the folks on the line. What would you say when it comes to audit recovery and managing vendor data and trying to avoid duplicates and the types of issues we're talking about today? What's your sage counsel for folks as they adapt to this hybrid work environment for how to adapt their processes to mitigate some of these issues?
Well, I would say that most organizations have adapted at this point. I mean, we're a couple years in. Employees are resilient. They've kind of figured it out. I think initially it was a struggle, just from a communication standpoint. Who do I go to? You're so used to just getting up and walking or having conversation around the coffee pot or the water cooler on this, that went away. It now required that you actually pick up the phone and so I think that there's been an adaptation and folks are accommodating that. And this is a little loosely about what you asked, Mark, but something I do think about is I'm sure some organizations will stay remote forever, but there is going to be a time in which organizations want to get back together, that they believe that being together as one is better. And I do worry a little bit about that transition back. I don't think it will last as long, and I think it will be less painful. But I do worry a little bit about that is, we've all become accustomed to working remote, and hopefully this pandemic comes to an end and folks that choose to go back to the office, and there's going to be that transition again. But maybe even a hybrid. I know we at Apex are looking at a hybrid model, which means you're working both. You're in the office a couple days, you're at home a couple days, and again, it takes time to adjust to that change. So I think folks have done a good job of adapting to this, but I do worry a little bit about when there's another change, and maybe we go back or go to a hybrid, and what impact that could have. And so just what do you do to prepare for that? Communicate, ensure that there's alignment across the whole procure to pay space, especially in recovery audit, because so much of what we do is with AP. So much of what we find, actually AP themselves can't control these issues. It's a partnership with procurement and master data and others within the organization.
Jose, an attendee writes, how much time did the audit recovery process add to your team's workload?
Yeah, so that was one of the concerns when we started this work, because not
betcha.
necessarily is that that we will secure an additional resource to do this work, but then once we started going through it, the workload, increasing workload is definitely not a concern, and it's a little bit also on management preference. So the all the legwork, most of the work, it all happens within Apex, and the only part that we do, and and maybe it's just for peace of mind, is when the Apex invoice us, we make a review of what being invoiced for, and it's not for any lack of trust, but unfortunately some of the recoveries will come via check. And because we've been in COVID for the last 2 years, check handling, it's a challenge. So basically, the review is more to make sure that not only that the recovery happened, but that the recovery was cash out. So that's the only step, and I would say it's kind of at the end, just to validate, that what we're being invoiced, it's fully recovered.
Phil, AP teams are working longer hours these days. Finance teams, for that matter, are working longer hours these days. It's got to be a concern of a lot of people listening in. Who has time to manage all this stuff? Put these people at ease, Phil.
Yeah, well, you are partnering with Apex to perform your recovery audit. And so I tell this to all of our clients, all of our partners, put the burden on us. Our full-time job, all we do is recovery audit. You all have day jobs, processing invoices, working with suppliers, dealing with disputes. And so for the recovery audit, I mean, we have tools in place. Our online claim collaboration tool, Audit View, it streamlines the process. Historically, with a recovery audit, we would provide recoveries and we would give credit memos, and that would have to be keyed into the system. And so we're saying, let us create an upload file that you can put right into your ERP. So our goal, our job is to take 99.9% of the work. Now, there are some things we cannot take, and Jose talked about that. Once we deliver value back to you and we invoice on those recoveries, you will just want to validate that. But we have a team that their job is just to make sure, is there anything we can do to accommodate this audit? Can we pull in this data element to help you as the credits are entered back into the system? Can we get access to this system to help us look things up to ensure that what we're pursuing is still a valid opportunity? So there's no magic answer, Mark. Depending on the size and what we're finding, it will impact the effort on our clients. But again, you're hiring us and partnering with us to do the work, put the burden on us. That's all we do.
Phil, a question for you. One of our attendees wants to know what's involved in getting the data from our ERP that you need, and what happens if we have multiple ERPs?
Yeah, so whether you have one ERP or 2 or 10, it doesn't matter for us. We want to acquire all the data that's applicable for the audit. As far as the acquiring of the data, and Jose talked about this a little bit earlier, but we have pre-written extracts that pull only the non-sensitive data that we need to perform the audit. And so some clients, that's our preferred method because it's the least burden on your IT organization. We provide you a read-only extract that pulls the data out of all the major ERPs. If you have a legacy system, well, obviously we don't have a pre-written extract for that. We will take table dumps. And so we will send you something as simple as a mapping document that says these are the required fields. If you can just send them to us electronically, we'll put the puzzle back together to load into our technology to perform the audit. But again, if you have one of the major ERPs, SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft, any of those major ERPs, we have pre-written extracts that will streamline that data. One other point, because I think it's important to mention, for clients who are using our first strike technology to prevent duplicate payments, well, then we pull the data ourselves. So we get approval from our clients to pull the data. We pull it ourselves. So there is zero involvement when it comes to data acquisition for those clients.
Music to a weary AP professional's ears. Phil, another question for you. One of our attendees writes, we operate in a global shared services environment with facilities in 4 countries. How does that work with your solution?
Yeah, so there's a couple different models that we can deploy when we're dealing with global clients. Most of our clients are global. And so the model could be that you have 4 distinct shared service centers that maybe are under 4 different jurisdictions and 4 leaderships. We can conduct those audits independently, and we might assign a team in that region of the world to conduct the audit. So we can look at the 4 audits as 4 individual audits. Our recommendation is that we not take that approach. We feel like there's more value to our clients when we have a consolidated global audit, because the value of that is that someone in the Asia Pac region gets to understand some of the challenges that might be occurring in the Americas, or someone in the Latin America area may be able to understand and glean something from what's going on in the European region. So our preference is to perform a consolidated global recovery audit. Now, we may meet with each individual team based on just the logistics, right? I mean, we got to change the times, and we might assign auditors in different parts of the world. So our preference is a consolidated global audit. You know, we can report individually by the region, or we can roll it all up to one. Some clients just say, no, I prefer that you conduct them individually. So we're flexible there.
Another question for you, Phil. The attendee writes, do many of your customers expect duplicate invoices, or are they surprised when they are found through audit?
Yeah, I would say that some expect it. You know, we operate in that 0.00, sometimes 0 error rate. And what that means is, you know, 99.9, keep going with 9% of the time, it's done right. And so we have some clients like, oh, we are perfect. Well, you know, I think we all strive for perfection, but I don't think any of us are perfect. And so I think it's reasonable to expect we will find some duplicates. I mean, ERP systems are great, but they're not designed to prevent duplicate payments. I mean, they have that technology, but that's not what they were built for. So some are going to slip through the crack. I talked earlier about change. You know, I asked an organization, when they asked me, well, what's going to drive it? Have you had any change in your organization? They said, yes. You know, we created a captive solution in Colombia. Okay, well, when did that occur? Well, you're probably going to have a spike in duplicate payments during that time. So I think it's reasonable for clients to expect some. Now, I will tell you, some go in thinking we are great, and we have to politely show them that, hey, there's some opportunities to improve here, because they're always spike. And we have some situations where we will perform an audit one year and it's almost squeaky clean. Big change occurs in your organization. The next year, you know, Pandora's box opens. And so it just depends, Mark, on kind of what's going on. But I think it's reasonable for everyone to expect. So, I've been doing this for over 17 years. I've never performed an audit where we didn't find something. Never.
Interesting. Jose, did you expect to find duplicate invoices?
Yes. Actually, I was gonna pitch in
So
there.
you weren't perfect. You didn't think you were perfect over at Lululemon, huh?
Absolutely not. We definitely saw the opportunity, and you know, for the folks listening, you know, if you are responsible for the operation of the shared services, I think it's better if it's self-driven, right? Like, hey, there's an opportunity here. We would like to take a look. No cost. We just need to send some information, and then you can see for yourself, you know, how good you are. Our numbers, you know, just because we're just closing the year and opening the new year, our numbers, you know, are really good. You know, most of our invoices are happening, are being processed as expected. We're over 99% accurate. You know, in way over 99. But you know, still, you know, we're doing hundreds of thousands of transactions. You know, only a tiny percentage of those can be run. So there you go. There comes the opportunity. And in I guess the best case scenario, you go through the exercise and you know, and you are like, I don't know, 99.99% accurate, and and the findings are not material, well, good for you. Then you know that you're close to perfection. But I think based on what Phil shared, very likely that you will find something once you go through the exercise.
Another duplicate invoice question coming your way. Jose, an attendee, wants to know, do you leverage Coupa's duplicate invoice capabilities as well? And how does that compare to the capabilities in the Apex solution?
Yes, that is a product that we have not leveraged yet. We did review it. I believe it's called Koopas Pen Guard. When we review it, and this was a few years ago, back then, I don't think we don't feel that it was the right solution. We have not reviewed it again recently, but no, we don't leverage that currently.
Phil, what's the single biggest piece of advice you'd give to somebody who's gearing up to do audit recovery or might even be on the fence about whether they need one?
Do it. Just do
Oh.
it. Yeah, be proactive. Get ahead of it. I mean, you don't want to be 6 months down the road to some initiative in the organization, and like Jose was mentioning earlier, suppliers are calling you saying, "Hey, you paid us twice," or "Look, we got this large outstanding credit that's been on the books for this amount of time." Be proactive. Get ahead of it. Identify where the opportunities are, and then put a plan in place to fix them. I mean, that's certainly you want the money back, but our clients do recovery audits because they want to get better. Right? I mean, certainly the byproduct of that is they expect us to recover what's out there, but they're doing the recovery audit to improve their business, improve their processes. And Jose mentioned this, but if you go through a recovery audit and there's little to no findings, that just supports maybe what you've been singing internally, which is, look, we've worked hard to get our processes and procedures in place and we're following them. So get ahead of it. You don't want to be chasing it on the backside.
Yeah.
Jose, what would be your advice to somebody as they gear up to do an audit recovery?
Yes, based on one of the slides that Phil presented, like the time is now. So let's say, they say, oh, maybe 2022, we already have a bunch of stuff in the pipeline. So maybe it's going to be in 2023. You can do that, but there will be a cost associated with that decision. So the time that you sit on it and think about it, then you know that there's recoveries that you're potentially going to be forfeited.
Yeah, well, that'll be our final word. Jose, Phil, hey, thanks so much for an excellent presentation and for sharing your insights with us today. And thank all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jovi. Ms. Jovi.
Thank you, Mark. That's all the time we have for today's program. I just have a few quick housekeeping notes to go over before we officially close out. If you could please fill out the short evaluation form that will appear once you close the webinar, this will better help us serve your needs in future webinars. And as a reminder, the on-demand materials will be emailed to everyone within 2 business days. This will include a PDF of the slides as well as a link to the recording of today's presentation. Thank you again to Mark, Phil, and Jose for a great presentation today, and thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. This webinar was brought to you by IOFM and sponsored by apexanalytix. Thank you all and have a great day.